The Great Hall of Prime was built from living crystal. Light moved through its walls like blood through veins. 1,000 species had stood in this chamber over 40,000 years, seeking justice, seeking peace, seeking help. Today, Ambassador stood alone before the 12 thrones of the Galactic Concord. She was a small woman by human standards, dark hair pulled back tight, eyes that had seen too much death in the past 6 months. Her voice did not shake when she spoke, though her hands wanted to. 17,000 dead, she said. The words echoed in the vast space. 3 colonies burned to ash. Children pulled from their beds and slaughtered in the streets. This is what the Dominion has done to humanity. This is why I stand before you today. The 12 elder races watched her from their crystalline thrones. There were beings of pure light, ancient beyond measure. They were tall and thin, their skin like polished stone, the breath liquid metal. Each species had ruled the stars when humanity was still learning to make fire. High Arbiter leaned forward. He was, and his form shifted like a living equation. When he spoke, his voice came from everywhere and nowhere. We have received your evidence, Ambassador. The Conquered recognizes the tragedy that has befallen your outer colonies. We offer our deepest sympathies. Felt something cold settle in her stomach. She knew that tone. She had heard it in boardrooms and courtrooms back on Earth. It was the tone of someone about to say no. Sympathies will not protect our people, she said. They are not stopping. Our intelligence shows they are planning more attacks, larger attacks. We need military support, or at the very least, we need permission to defend ourselves. A ripple of movement went through the council. The delegate made a sound that might have been laughter. Permission to defend yourselves, they repeated. How very human. You speak of defense, but we know what you truly want. You want war. I want my people to stop dying. And you believe more death is the answer. The delegate's voice bubbled like boiling mercury. This is precisely why younger species are not permitted to engage in military action. You lack perspective. You lack wisdom. Took a slow breath. She had prepared for this. She had studied the Conquered's history, their laws, their endless debates. She knew what they feared. They have attacked 12 species in the past century, she said. Each time the Conquered has done nothing. You send protests. You impose sanctions that mean nothing to a species that does not trade with you. And the attacks continue. How many more must die before you act? High Arbiter raised a hand made of geometric light. They are a regional concern. They exist outside Conquered space. Direct intervention would destabilize the entire sector. It would invite retaliation against member species. It would risk a war that could consume millions of worlds. So instead, you let them consume us, one colony at a time. We let you survive, said, and there was something cold in his voice now. Humanity has been a member of this Conquered for 80 years. In that time, you have grown from a single world to 40 colonies. You have technology you could never have developed alone. You have peace with species who would have destroyed you. And in return, we ask only that you follow our laws, our ways. Stared at the shifting light of his form. Your ways let children burn. Our ways have maintained peace for 40,000 years. The words hung in the air, looked around the chamber at the 12 ancient species. Some would not meet her eyes. Others watched her with something like pity. None of them would help. What is the Council's official response? She asked. Her voice was flat now, empty. Spoke as if reading from a script. The Galactic Concord offers humanitarian aid to affected human colonies. We will dispatch medical ships and relief supplies within the standard. We will issue a formal diplomatic protest to the Dominion, condemning their actions in the strongest possible terms. And military action. Any unilateral military action by humanity will be considered a violation of Conquered law. Such action would result in immediate expulsion from the Conquered and total economic isolation from member species. Paused. You do not understand war as we do, Ambassador. You have been for barely 3 centuries. We have watched empires rise and fall. We have seen what happens when young species play with fire. Trust in the process. Trust in time. They will overreach eventually, and when they do, the conquered will act. How many of my people will be dead by then? Fewer than would die in a war you cannot win. Stood in silence for a long moment. The crystal walls pulsed with soft light around her. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear music, the singing their mathematical songs, celebrating another day of peace in a galaxy they believed they controlled. I understand, she said finally. I will convey the Council's decision to my government. She turned and walked out of the great hall. Her footsteps echoed against crystal floors that had been polished by 40,000 years of diplomacy. Behind her, the 12 elder races returned to their discussions, their debates, their endless careful management of a galaxy they thought they understood. They did not cease face as she walked away. They did not see the cold fire in her eyes. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks, spent most of it alone in her cabin, reading reports. The death toll from New Santiago had risen to 6,000. They had left no survivors old enough to speak. On Harvest Moon, the colonists had tried to fight back with mining equipment and improvised weapons. They had killed 11 warriors before being overwhelmed. The Dominion had responded by burning the colony twice, making sure nothing would ever grow there again. When her ship finally entered Earth orbit, felt something she had not felt in years. It was not hope, it was not despair, it was certainty. The United Earth Parliament met in Geneva, in a building that had stood for 300 years. Its walls were lined with flags from every nation that had once divided humanity, kept as reminders of a past they had thought they had. Stood before the assembled representatives of 12 billion people, she told them everything. The Council's refusal, the diplomatic protest that would accomplish nothing, the threat of expulsion if humanity dared to defend itself. When she finished, the chamber was silent, could see the anger on their faces, the grief, the helpless rage of people who had been told to accept the unacceptable. Then Defense Minister rose from his seat. He was an old man with white hair and a soldier's bearing. His family had died on New Santiago. His had been among the 6,000. Then we do this alone, he said. The words fell like stones into still water. Around the chamber, representatives began to nod. Some were crying. Some were smiling. All of them understood what those words meant. Humanity had been part of the galactic community for 80 years. They had followed the rules. They had trusted the process. They had believed that civilization meant something. Now they knew better. On the edge of human space, they were already planning their next attack. They had no fear of the soft, weak humans who hid behind alien protectors. They had no idea what was coming. No one did. In the darkness between stars, humanity began to remember what it had tried so hard to forget. The wars, the strategies, the terrible, beautiful art of survival at any cost. The galaxy had told them to be peaceful, to be patient, to accept their losses and wait for others to save them. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity did not wait. 6 months passed. On the surface, nothing changed. Human diplomats continued to attend conquered meetings. Human traders continued to follow galactic law. Human colonies continued to mourn their dead while they grew bolder with each passing week. But beneath the surface, something vast was stirring. Admiral Way stood on the observation deck of a station that did not exist. According to every official record, this region of the cloud was empty, just ice and rock and the eternal darkness between stars. In reality, it held the largest military construction project in human history. The Nemesis fleet. 200 warships floated in the void before her. They were not beautiful ships. The conquered had taught humanity to build elegant vessels with smooth lines and efficient systems. These ships were different. They were blocky and angular, covered in armor plates and weapon mounts. They looked like they had been designed by people who expected to be shot at. They had been. "Production is ahead of schedule," said Commander, her second in command. He was a tall man with kind eyes and steady hands. Before the attacks, he had been a cargo ship captain. Now he commanded a battlecruiser named Retribution. "We should have full fleet readiness within 3 months." Nodded but did not smile. "They hit another colony last week, a mining outpost near Tau, 2,000 workers." "I heard," his voice was tight. "My cousin was stationed there." "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry, Admiral. Just give me a chance to make them pay." Understood that feeling. Everyone in the fleet understood it. They had all lost someone. They were all here for the same reason. Across human space, the mobilization continued in secret. Factories that officially produced mining equipment were actually building missiles. Research labs that officially studied medicine were actually developing new weapons. Training facilities that officially prepared colonists for frontier life were actually creating soldiers. The conquered had forbidden humanity from maintaining a military, so humanity had hidden it instead. In a bunker beneath the Alps, General Maria Santos reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The Dominion had 600 warships. Their technology was roughly equal to humanity's, maybe slightly better in some areas. They had been conquering and enslaving species for 2,000 years. On paper, humanity had no chance. Santos smiled as she read the reports. Paper did not fight wars. People did. And humans had been fighting wars since before they had discovered fire. "Show me the tactical archives," she said to her assistant. The young officer hesitated. "Ma'am, those files are classified at the highest level. The conquered specifically prohibited." "The conquered prohibited us from defending ourselves. I think we are past caring what the conquered prohibits." The files appeared on her screen. Thousands of years of human military history, carefully hidden from galactic view. The conquered had made humanity promise to abandon its violent past. They had made them teach their children that war was primitive, that conflict was failure, that true civilization meant endless compromise. They had been wrong. Santos read about Alexander, who had conquered half the known world before the age of 30. She read about Hannibal, who had crossed mountains with elephants to attack his enemies from an impossible direction. She read about Sun, who had written that all warfare was based on deception. She read about the Spartans at Thermopylae, the defenders of Stalingrad, the resistance fighters who had never surrendered even when all hope was lost. These were not stories of primitive violence. They were stories of survival, of sacrifice, of people who refused to accept defeat. Santos began to plan. Meanwhile, the conquered was growing suspicious. Counselor, an observer, had been assigned to monitor human activities. He was young for his species, only 4,000 years old, but he had a sharp mind and a talent for pattern recognition. Something was wrong in human space. The numbers did not add up. "Their resource consumption has increased by 40%, he reported to High Arbiter. But their production output shows no corresponding increase. They claim mining accidents have reduced their efficiency, but the accident rate they report would mean they are the most careless species in the galaxy." Light flickered with what might have been concern. "What do you believe is happening?" "I do not know, but I believe they are hiding something large." "Continue your observations. Report anything unusual." Bowden. He spent the next month traveling through human space, visiting colonies and stations, asking questions that no one wanted to answer. Everywhere he went, he found the same thing: grief, anger, and beneath it all, a strange kind of hope that he could not explain. On his last day in human space, he visited a memorial on Mars. It was a simple wall of stone covered with names, the dead from the attacks. He stood before it for a long time, reading the names, trying to understand what he was seeing. A human woman approached him. She was old, her hair white, her face lined with years of hard work. She looked at the wall, then at. "My grandson's name is on this wall," she said. "He was 7 years old." Did not know how to respond. They did not grieve as humans did. They were beings of pure thought, of mathematics and light. Death was simply a transition to them, a change in the equation. "I am sorry for your loss," he said, because it seemed like the thing to say. The woman looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. The Conquered could have stopped this. They chose not to. "The situation is complex." "No," her voice was firm. "It is not complex. Children are dead, more will die, and your people have decided that our children are not worth saving." She turned back to the wall. "Go home, counselor. Tell your masters what you have seen here. Tell them that we will not forget, we will not forgive, and we will not wait for permission to survive." Left human space the next day. His report was filed and reviewed by the Conquered's Intelligence Division. They concluded that humanity was simply grieving, that the increased resource consumption was probably due to memorial construction and psychological counseling programs. They were wrong. 3 weeks later, they launched their largest attack yet. The colony of New Helsinki, population 340,000. It was a beautiful world, covered in forests and lakes that reminded the colonists of the homeland they had named it for. They arrived with 50 ships. They broadcast no demands, no warnings. They simply began to burn. The colonists fought back with everything they had. Civilian shuttles rammed into cruisers. Mining lasers were turned against enemy fighters. Farmers and teachers and doctors picked up weapons and died defending their families. It was not enough. It was never enough. When the rescue ships arrived 3 days later, they found only ashes. They had left a message burned into the planetary surface, visible from orbit. It was written in their language, but the translation was simple enough. "Your masters cannot save you." In a bunker beneath Geneva, President stared at the images from New Helsinki. She had been president for only 2 years. She had never wanted to be a wartime leader, but history did not care what she wanted. "How long until the Nemesis fleet is ready?" she asked. Admiral's face appeared on the screen. Even through the digital connection, could see the fire in her eyes. 72 hours. Closed her eyes. 340,000 people. Gone. Because the galaxy had decided that human lives were not worth protecting. "Then in 72 hours, she said, "we show them what happens when they ignore our warnings." The fleet was coming. The galaxy was not ready. No one ever was. The forward operating base in the Cygnus Reach was a fortress among the stars. It orbited a massive gas giant, its dark metal hull bristling with weapons and sensor arrays. 40 warships surrounded it like predators guarding their den. For 200 years, this base had been the launching point for raids into neighboring space. No species had ever dared to attack it. Commander stood on the command deck, watching the endless swirl of the gas giant below. He was a veteran of 100 campaigns, his scales from battles against a dozen different species. They were conquerors. It was their nature, their destiny. The weak existed to serve the strong. The humans were the weakest species he had ever seen. Soft flesh, short lives, no natural weapons. They hid behind their alien protectors and trembled when they came for them. The attacks on their colonies had been almost boring. They died so easily. "Commander," said his sensor officer, "we are detecting unusual readings at the edge of the system." Turned, "What kind of readings?" "Multiple FTL signatures, many of them." The officer's voice grew uncertain. "At least 200 contacts." Before could respond, the stars themselves seemed to tear open. Ships poured through the wounds in space, emerging from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. They were ugly ships, blocky and brutal, nothing like the elegant vessels that conquered species built. Human ships. Stared at the tactical display. 200 warships. The humans did not have 200 warships. They were not allowed to have warships at all. All ships to battle stations, he ordered. Launch fighters, prepare. A message cut through all frequencies. A human voice, female, calm and cold as ice. This is Admiral Way of the United Earth Navy. We gave you the chance to leave our people alone. You chose to keep killing. We gave the conquered the chance to stand with us. They chose to stand aside. Remember that. This is the consequence of your choices. The channel went dead. Then the humans attacked. Had fought many battles. He understood war, or so he thought, but he had never seen anything like this. The first wave was not warships. It was missiles. Thousands of them, spreading across the void in swarms that overwhelmed his sensors. His point defense systems began firing, destroying hundreds, but more kept coming. They were not all real, he realized. Some were decoys, electronic ghosts designed to confuse and distract. While his ships focused on the missiles, the human fleet split into 3 groups. One came straight at the station. One curved around the gas giant, using its gravity to accelerate. The third seemed to retreat, falling back toward the edge of the system. "They are running," shouted one of his officers. "Cowards." Knew better. He had seen that maneuver before in ancient tactical records. It was a trap. But before he could warn his ships, the human vessels that had curved around the gas giant emerged from behind it at impossible speed. They had used the planet's gravity like a slingshot, turning their ships into projectiles. They hit the flank like a hammer. The first cruiser died before it could even turn to face its attacker. The humans did not fight like other species. They did not keep their distance, did not trade careful shots across the void. They closed to point-blank range and fired everything they had. It was brutal, it was savage, it was working. Ordered his ships to form a defensive sphere around the station. It was the standard response to this kind of attack. Every species in the galaxy fought this way. The humans would have to break through the formation or withdraw. The humans did neither. Instead, 3 human ships accelerated directly toward the formation. They were not firing. They were not maneuvering. They were simply flying straight at the enemy line at maximum speed. "Destroy those ships," commanded. His cruisers opened fire. The 3 human ships were torn apart in seconds, their hulls shattering under concentrated weapons fire. Then the debris exploded. The ships had been packed with explosives. They were not warships at all. They were bombs, guided by skeleton crews who had known exactly what they were doing. The explosions tore through the formation, destroying 5 ships instantly and crippling 3 more. In the chaos that followed, the human fleet struck from every direction at once. The retreating force had circled back, arriving just as they were trying to reform. The main body of the fleet pushed through the gap created by the suicide ships. Fighters swarmed between the larger vessels, targeting weapons systems and engines. And then came the boarding parties. Could not believe what his sensors were showing him. Human shuttles were attaching themselves to ships. Soldiers in armored suits were cutting through hulls and fighting their way inside. No one boarded enemy ships. It was insane. It was a waste of resources. It was something only primitives would do. The humans did not seem to care about any of that. The battle lasted 4 hours. 4 hours of fire and blood and screaming metal. When it was over, the fleet was gone. 40 ships destroyed or captured. The station itself had been taken by human marines, its commander dragged from his hiding place in the lower decks. Admiral stood on the station's command deck, looking out at the wreckage floating in space. The gas giant turned slowly below, uncaring, eternal. Around her, human soldiers were securing prisoners and collecting intelligence from computers. "Admiral," said Commander, "we have incoming communication from Prime. The Conquered is demanding to speak with you." Smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Put them through." High Arbiter's light filled the screen. He looked different than remembered, smaller somehow, less certain. "Admiral, the Conquered demands an explanation for this unprovoked attack. You have violated every principle of galactic law. You have committed acts of barbarism that—" "Barbarism?" His voice was quiet, but it cut through his words like a blade. "You want to talk to me about barbarism? Let me show you something." She transmitted the data they had found in the computers. Plans for future attacks on human colonies. Lists of populations to be exterminated. Slave labor assignments for the survivors. And at the bottom of the files, a note from himself. It thanked the conquered for their continued neutrality. It promised that expansion would not threaten any conquered member worlds as long as the elder races continued to look the other way. "You knew," said. "You knew what they were planning. You knew they would keep killing us. And you did nothing because they promised to leave you alone." His light flickered. "The situation is more complex than—" "No, it is not complex. It is simple. You abandoned us. You told us to wait. You told us to trust in the process." Leaned forward. "We are done trusting. We are done waiting. The wanted a war. Now they have one. And if the conquered tries to stop us, they will have one too." She cut the transmission. On the station screens, alerts began to flash. The Dominion was mobilizing its entire war fleet. 800 ships were gathering at their home system, preparing to respond to this humiliation. Commander looked at the numbers. "Admiral, we have 200 ships, they have 800, the math." "The math said we could not beat them today," said. "The math was wrong." She turned to face her officers. "They are finally taking us seriously. Good. That is exactly what we wanted." In the darkness of space, the first battle of humanity's war had been won, but the war itself was just beginning. And humanity was ready. The war lasted 18 months. Across 100 star systems, humanity and the Dominion fought battles that would be studied for centuries to come. And in every battle, the galaxy learned something new about the species they had dismissed as children. They learned that humans did not tire. Admiral implemented a rotation system that no other species had ever attempted. Fresh crews were constantly moving through the fleet, replacing exhausted soldiers before they could make fatal mistakes. They operated on the old model, keeping the same crews in place until a battle was won or lost. Human ships could maintain pressure for weeks at a time. Commanders began to dread the human ability to simply keep coming. They learned that humans adapted. Every tactic worked exactly once. The first time they used a new weapon or formation, they might catch human forces off guard. By the second time, humanity had developed a counter. By the third time, humanity was using this own tactics against them, improved and refined. General Santos kept a team of analysts working around the clock, studying every engagement. They called themselves the historians, and their job was to learn from the enemy faster than the enemy could learn from them. It was an ancient human tradition, passed down from wars that had raged on Earth for thousands of years. Adapt or die. They had never faced an enemy who adapted as quickly as humans did. They learned that humans sacrificed. At the Battle of Vega Station, 3 human destroyers held a defensive position against 20 cruisers. Their job was to buy time for civilian transports to escape. They were given an order to retreat when the odds became impossible. They refused. For 6 hours they fought a battle they could not win. One by one, their ships were destroyed, but they held the line. Every civilian transport escaped. 800 crew members died so that 40,000 colonists could live. Humanity built a memorial for them. They recorded every name. They told the story to every child. This was what it meant to be human. You fought for something greater than yourself. You gave everything so that others would not have to. They did not understand this. To them, sacrifice was waste. Why die for others when you could live for yourself? They did not realize that this was exactly why they were losing. They learned that humans remembered. Every atrocity was recorded. Every dead colonist was named. Every burning world was photographed and archived. Human soldiers went into battle with the names of the fallen written on their armor. They were not fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting for the dead. They were fighting so that no one else would have to burn. They began to notice something strange. Human prisoners did not break under interrogation. They did not beg for mercy. They recited names. Thousands of names memorized and repeated like prayers, the names of everyone they had killed. It was terrifying. They had conquered dozens of species. None of them had ever fought like this. The turning point came at IV. Was a core world, one of the founding planets of the Dominion. It had never been attacked in 2,000 years of history. They committed 300 ships to defend it. If fell, the war would effectively be over. Admiral arrived with 150 ships, half the enemy's number. By every calculation, she should have retreated and looked for easier targets. She attacked anyway. The Battle of IV lasted 3 days. Used a tactic that human military historians would later call the gambit. She deliberately weakened her center line, making it look like a mistake. The commander saw an opportunity and pushed through the gap, sending 200 ships to encircle the human fleet. It was exactly what wanted. The planet's gravity well was behind the advance. They had pushed so far forward that they could not easily retreat, and while they were focused on the center line, reserve forces emerged from hiding behind moons. 100 fresh ships, fully armed and ready for battle. They found themselves trapped between two human forces with a planet's gravity pulling them toward destruction. They could not retreat. They could not advance. They could only fight and die. By the end of the 3rd day, 200 ships had been destroyed. The human losses were 40 ships. Had achieved a victory that should have been impossible, using nothing but strategy and the willingness to take risks that no other species would consider. The galaxy was watching. On Prime, the Conquered's unity began to crack. Junior species who had suffered from aggression in the past started to ask uncomfortable questions. Why had the elder races refused to help humanity? Why had they allowed them to prey on weaker species for so long? Why was the Conquered protecting attackers instead of defending victims? The compact broke from the Conquered first. They sent a message to Earth offering support. They did not have many ships, but they had resources and technology that humanity needed. President accepted their help with one condition: no payment, no obligations. They could fight alongside humanity if they chose, but humanity would not force them. This was not about building an empire. This was about survival. The Federation joined next. Then 3 more species who had been victims in centuries past. The alliance grew not through conquest but through choice. Species who had been told to accept their losses and trust in the process finally had another option. They watched his empire crumble and felt something he had never felt before: fear. He sent a message to the Conquered, demanding that they intervene. The elder races had promised to maintain the balance of power. They had promised that they would be protected as long as they did not threaten conquered worlds. Ambassador received a copy of the message. She read it and smiled. Then she sent her response directly to the broadcast on every frequency so the entire galaxy could hear. You asked the Conquered to restrain us. They refused. Now you ask them to save you. They cannot. The Conquered had their chance to shape this war. They chose neutrality. They chose to let our children burn while they debated and discussed. Now they will watch. They will learn. And they will remember. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was ice. You chose to make war on humanity. Now you will learn what that means. We gave you every chance to stop. We begged for peace. We pleaded for mercy. You answered with fire and blood. Now we answer the same way: no negotiation, no surrender. This ends when you are defeated completely or when we are destroyed trying. There is no middle ground. There is no compromise. There is only victory or death. She cut the transmission. In the throne room, they stared at the tactical displays showing human fleet movements. They were coming, not for another colony, not for another outpost. They were coming for the Dominion itself. 800 ships against humanity's remaining 200. But the numbers meant nothing anymore. He had seen what humans could do when they were outnumbered. He had seen them sacrifice everything for victory. He had seen them adapt and overcome and refuse to stop no matter the cost. For the first time in the history of his species, they considered the possibility that they might actually lose. And in the darkness between stars, the human fleet gathered for its final push. They were tired, they were wounded, they had lost so many. But they had not lost their purpose. The war was almost over. One way or another it would end soon. And humanity intended to be the ones left standing. The Of hung in the void like a dark jewel. It was a massive planet, covered in cities built on the bones of conquered species. For 2,000 years, this palace had looked down on those cities from the highest mountain. For 2,000 years, no enemy had ever come close to threatening it. Now the human fleet filled the sky above it. Admiral did not order the bombardment that everyone expected. She did not rain fire on the cities below, did not burn the planet as they had burned so many human colonies. Instead, she established a blockade. Nothing went in, nothing came out. Why? Commander asked. After everything they have done to us, why show mercy? Looked at the planet below. Millions have lived there. Soldiers, yes, but also workers, families, children who had never chosen this war. She thought of New Helsinki. She thought of the names on the memorial walls. She thought of what humanity had lost and what they might become if they lost themselves in revenge. Because we are not them, she said. We fight because we have to. We kill because they give us no choice. But we do not murder. We do not burn innocent people in their beds. If we did, we would be no better than the monsters we came to stop. The blockade held for 3 months. Human ships patrolled the system, intercepting any vessel that tried to break through. The Dominion's remaining fleet was trapped in orbit, unable to escape, unable to fight, unable to do anything but watch as their empire collapsed around them. On the surface, things fell apart. They had ruled through fear and strength. Now he had neither. The war had destroyed the Dominion's military power. The blockade was destroying its economy. Food grew scarce. Systems failed. And the people, who had been told their whole lives that they were the greatest species in the galaxy, began to question the leader who had brought them to ruin. The revolution started in the industrial districts of the capital city. Workers who had spent their lives building weapons for the wars demanded an end to the fighting. Soldiers who had lost everything at and a dozen other battles joined them. Even some of his own generals turned against him. They stormed the palace on the 91st day of the blockade. They died in his throne room, killed by his own people. His body was dragged through the streets of the capital while crowds cheered. The war that had killed millions ended not with a final battle, but with a desperate people turning on the tyrant who had destroyed their future. The new government sued for peace. Admiral received their surrender in the same chamber where they had once planned the destruction of human colonies. The terms were harsh. The Dominion would disarm completely. They would pay reparations to every species they had ever attacked. Their military leaders would face war crimes tribunals. The territories they had conquered would be freed. But there was no genocide, no mass executions, no revenge. The representatives looked at with confusion in their eyes. They had expected death. They had expected to be treated the way they had treated their own victims. "Why spare us?" one of them asked. "We killed your children, we burned your worlds. Why not do the same to us?" Considered the question for a long moment. Through the window, she could see the sun setting over a planet that had been the heart of an evil empire. It was still beautiful. It would still be home to billions of beings who deserved a chance at something better. "Because the war is over," she said. "Continuing to kill would not bring back our dead. It would only create more dead, more orphans, more reasons for your children to hate us and our children to hate them. The cycle would continue forever." She stood and looked directly at the delegates. "We did not fight this war to destroy you. We fought it to stop you. That is done. Now we build something better. They did not understand. Perhaps they never would. But they signed the surrender anyway because they had no other choice. With the war won, humanity turned its attention to the Galactic Concord. The elder races watched nervously as human diplomats requested an audience. They expected demands for punishment, for revenge, for acknowledgement of their failure. Instead, President stood before the council and spoke of the future. "You told us we were too young to understand war," she said. "You were wrong. We understand it better than any species in this galaxy. We understand it because we have lived it. Our history is written in blood. We have fought wars that killed millions. We have built weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We have stared into the darkness and seen our own extinction." She paused, letting her words settle over the ancient beings who watched her. "And because of that history, we have also learned something else. We have learned that war must end. We have learned that peace is not weakness. We have learned that the strong must protect the weak, not prey on them." High Arbiter shifted uneasily. "What do you want from us, President?" The conquered failed. Not just humanity, but every species that was ever abandoned to face threats alone. Your 40,000 years of peace were built on looking the other way while others suffered. That is not peace. That is cowardice. The chamber erupted in outraged voices. The elder races had never been spoken to like this. They had never been challenged by a species so young and so small. Waited for the noise to die down. "We are not here to punish you," she continued. "We are here to offer you a choice. The conquered can continue as it has, and humanity will build something new without you. Or you can join us in creating a real alliance. One where every species has a voice. One where threats are confronted together. One where the strong do not simply watch while the weak are destroyed." She looked around at the ancient faces watching her. "You had 40,000 years to build a better galaxy. You built a comfortable one instead. Now it is our turn. Help us or stand aside. But do not try to stop us. You have seen what happens when you ignore our warnings." The conquered debated for weeks. Some of the elder races could not accept being partners with a species so young and violent. They from galactic politics, retreating to their home systems to watch events unfold from a safe distance. But others saw something in humanity that they had lost long ago. Courage, purpose, the willingness to sacrifice for something greater than themselves. These species joined humanity in building the Stellar Alliance, a new coalition based on mutual defense and shared responsibility. The galaxy changed, slowly at first, then faster as the new order took hold. Species that had lived in fear of predators like the found protection. Trade routes that had been plagued by raiders became safe. Disputes that might once have led to war were resolved through negotiation, backed by the knowledge that the alliance would respond to aggression with overwhelming force. It was not a perfect peace. There were still conflicts, still tragedies, still moments when violence seemed like the only answer, but it was better than what had come before. It was a peace built on justice instead of indifference. Years later, Counselor visited Earth. The observer who had once investigated humanity now came as a scholar, trying to understand the species that had reshaped the galaxy. He stood before a memorial on Mars, reading the names of the dead from the war. Thousands of names carved in stone, an eternal flame burning at its center. The inscription at the base was simple. They gave everything so others would not have to. Admiral found him there. She was retired now, her hair, her uniform replaced by simple civilian clothes. But her eyes still held the same fire they had held when she led the Nemesis fleet into battle. "I came to understand," said. "We thought your violence made you lesser. We did not see that it also made you this." He gestured at the memorial. "You remember your dead with such care. You honor their sacrifice. You turn your grief into purpose." Stood beside him, looking at the names she knew by heart. Friends, soldiers, heroes. "We fight so hard because we know what we are fighting for," she said. "That is the thing you never understood about us. We are not violent because we love war. We are violent because we love peace. We love it enough to kill for it, enough to die for it, enough to do terrible things so that our children will not have to." She turned to face him. The conquered looked at our history and saw only blood. They did not see the lessons we learned from it. They did not see the walls we built to keep the darkness out. They did not see that every war we survived made us more determined to prevent the next one. Was silent for a long moment. The wind blew across the memorial plaza, carrying the scent of the gardens that humanity had planted there. Life growing from the soil of a planet they had made their own. "I think I understand now," he said finally. "You are not warriors who learned peace. You are survivors who learned that peace must be defended." Smiled, but there was sadness in it. Every species that has ever lived has faced the same choice. You can hide from danger and hope it passes you by, or you can face it, fight it, and build something that will outlast you. She looked up at the sky, where stars were beginning to appear in the fading light. "We chose to fight. We will always choose to fight, not because we want to, but because someone has to." She turned to leave, then paused. "Tell your people what you learned here, counselor. Tell them that humanity will always be ready to defend the innocent and punish the guilty. Tell them that we remember our dead and honor our promises. And tell them this." Her voice grew hard. "Do not make us prove it again." She walked away into the gathering darkness, leaving alone with the memorial and the names of the dead and the weight of everything humanity had sacrificed to build a better galaxy. The stars burned overhead, the eternal flame flickered, and somewhere in the void, human ships patrolled the borders of civilized space, watching for threats, ready to respond. They would always be ready. That was the price of peace. And humanity had paid it in full.